Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. Last month we talked about heroes and villains, and in the part about heel face turns, I mentioned how Hans from Frozen was not a good villain reveal, which led me to thinking about twist villains as they're called, and when they're done wrong, like with Hans, and when they're done right, like say with Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2, which came out 14 years earlier and was produced by the same studio. Well, technically Pixar is its own thing, or was its own thing, but you get the idea. But before we go off the rails, we gotta establish the basics. What is a twist villain? Well, a twist villain is sort of a villain who their being a villain is a plot twist in and of itself. Pretty self-explanatory. And in that explanation, we highlight the major issue and why it's always not done the best in media in this day and age. To do a good plot twist, you have to be willing to lie and mislead your viewers to keep the reveal a surprise. And we can dissect why it works for Stinky Pete, and not so much for Hans from the Southern Isles by pointing out the basics. For Stinky Pete, the old prospector, the reveal works because the logic makes sense. We as the audience assumed that he had Woody and Jesse's best intentions in mind when he spoke with them. Also, we assumed, like Woody did, that it was Jesse who hit the remote. The fact that he could leave his box was in and of itself part of the reveal, but aside from that, everything was entirely plausible. Hans, on the other hand, you have to ignore literally every scene before the reveal. If he truly was as selfish and wicked as he seemed, he'd have no reason to be a good leader in charge of protecting the people of Arendelle. Sure, he and defenders of this reveal say he's trying to ingratiate himself with the people of the kingdom, but think about it logically. He's statedly not of the bloodline that would inherit the kingdom, and even if he married Anna, or even Elsa, he'd just be a consort. His plan makes no goddamn sense is what I'm trying to say. So because the twist itself contradicts the logic and facts the movie made us pay attention to, it becomes a bad twist, and thus Hans is a bad twist villain. I would even go as far as to say that him being a villain was completely unnecessary and an asshole. In the original script, Elsa was going to be the villain, and even if they rewrote the script after hearing Let It Go, the movie didn't necessarily need a bad guy. The situation itself was the villain. That and the Weasel guy and his sons. Another bad villain twist is Frost from Dragon Ball Super, but only in the anime. In the manga, his characterization is played completely differently, but let me explain. During the Tournament of Destroyers, Frost was a combatant for Team Universe 6. He resembled the Universe 7 galactic tyrant Frieza due to being of the same race, and when he fought Goku, he injected him with poison to end the fight quickly. This was spotted by Piccolo and called out by Vegeta in both versions. In the manga, he did so because he was a pragmatist and wanted to return to protecting his empire. In the anime, however, he starts monologuing. And goes on about how he engineers his own heroics so he can sell planets to the highest bidder to Vegeta in front of everyone, proving Vegeta's prejudice against him correct. And that's just stupid. Like, why would he do that? His villainy in the anime was specifically because Toei, like Vegeta, thought, oh, he looks like Frieza, therefore he must be evil, in spite of whatever Toriyama's notes actually said about the guy. Therefore, the twist that he is evil is both obligatory and cliché. Fortunately, the manga never does this, which makes it a markedly better version. The reason a lot of twist villains tend to fail is because the writers tend to focus more on the cliché of, quote, subverting the audience's expectations, rather than whether or not the reveal has any logical consistency. For example, a lot of later adaptations of Batman try to make Thomas and Martha Wayne have a villainous past, usually because the writers are envious bastards, and that in and of itself contradicts the fact that Bruce uses them as a moral pillar to uphold his crusade against crime. However, if you look at the reveal that Cyborg Superman was a bad guy in the Death and Return of Superman event, the twist villain makes a lot more sense. Cyborg Superman had until that point been skirting the line between good and evil pretty hard. He was brutal, violent, and terrifying. So the fact that he was a villain with a grudge against Superman trying to ruin his name and image just makes sense. The key is in the execution. Does it make sense in what we, the audience, know? And does it contradict anything we knew about, or were we just assuming? Atlantis: The Lost Empire did this perfectly with its villain, Lyle T. Rourke. When we meet him, we know that he's the head of the mercenary team that led the Iceland expedition funded by Mr. Whitmore. And from his behavior of what we see on screen before the reveal, he seems like a father to his men. However, what we don't pay attention to is the fact that the man is, by its literal definition, a mercenary. And like a mercenary, his loyalty is towards getting his payday. As such, it's totally believable that he had the missing page of the journal. He did, after all, have access to it before Milo did, and that he would be interested in the Atlantean power source as a means of auctioning it off to the highest bidder. None of this contradicts anything of what we saw before. The entire Atlantis crew were hired mercenaries. Whitmore even said so. It was Milo who was the idealist. What's funny is Atlantis the Lost Empire is a Disney work, so Frozen had no excuse. What's even funnier is there's a Disney picture even closer to Frozen's release that did the twist villain right. King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph. Granted, from the first moment you see him, the guy is sus as fuck. It's obvious he's a villain in some form or another. The twist is that he's actually Turbo, the guy who's game hopping in that arcade for the sake of seeking attention caused the video game characters to coin the phrase, going turbo. It's brilliant because the twist isn't that he's a villain, more so that his identity is a character we have been foreshadowed since the start of the movie and had assumed to that point that he was just there for the sake of the lore. It's even more damning when you see his need for attention drives him to merge with a Tyranid XP bug enemy from another game and try to become a virus that'll destroy the whole arcade. One would not expect on first viewing those plots to interconnect in such a way, but it all makes logical sense. Logic is the key, after all, to any good plot twist. Another couple of examples make sense because of that. Pixar's Monsters Incorporated has the reveal of Mr. Waterness as the villain, and it makes sense because when you think about everything from his perspective, his actions seem almost reasonable. There's an energy crisis ongoing in Monster World, and the biggest power provider for the world is his company. Everyone is literally relying on him. Granted, Sully does find an alternative solution, but you can see how he came to wanting to go to such drastic extremes. Lotso in Toy Story 3 serves as a narrative mirror darkly to what Woody could have been if he let his resentment for Buzz Lightyear fester in the first movie and was truly abandoned by Andy. Ernesto de la Cruz being an opportunistic sleazebag makes sense as we never knew him on a personal level, and his motto was seize the moment, so it's not a far stretch that he do so by any means necessary. Even the villain of Cars 2 makes sense when you realize what make and model he is and that the villains are all famous lemon cars. That's right, I defended Cars 2. Deal with it. But at the end of the day, these are all logically consistent and thus good examples of twist villains done right. So we know that Disney does know how to do them right. Well, Disney and Pixar, but you get the idea. If you want to think about it like this, you could say a twist villain works best when the writer makes the story like a whodunit mystery novel. Mystery stories always leave clues for the audience to deduce who the killer is, so when it's revealed later, they can go, "Aha! I knew it!" That's part of the appeal of the genre. So when you do something like make Scarlet Witch a villain in the latest Doctor Strange movie, which contradicts everything of what we've seen before of her in the MCU, it's not as good because it breaks the logical and narrative immersion. Sure, she could have fallen to villainy off screen, but we would need to see it. In the comics, Wanda flipped morality all the time, but in the MCU, she was fairly strong on the side of the heroes, and really only served Ultron against her and her brother's will ultimately. Sure, she lost her brother, and Vision, but we had yet to see her start of darkness. Even WandaVision wasn't quite that. Multiverse of Madness expected us to go along with the shocking twist that she was a bad guy because, reasons, I guess. One final example is from the Ace Attorney video game / visual novel series, in Case 2-4, Farewell My Turnabout. In this case, the client is the famous TV star named Matt Engard, who's being accused of killing his rival, Juan Corrida. What makes us believe that he's on the level is because when Phoenix asked him point blank if he killed Juan, the Psyche Locks, his method of seeing lies that debuted in that very game, didn't appear. And we assume that he's on the level because every other client Phoenix had until that point had been innocent. It's sort of the point of the series. But what is different about this case is Phoenix only takes it because an armed and dangerous hitman kidnaps his friend and partner, Maya Fey, and forces him to take Matt's case. That alone seems sus as fuck. But as you investigate, you find more and more evidence that Matt isn't exactly the fresh as a spring breeze persona that he lets on, and in truth, he actually did kill Juan. Well, technically. He hired the hitman holding Maya to do it, but still. This works perfectly as it not only fools you by having the game mechanics work against you, but your own expectations for the series up to that point. You assume Matt is innocent because the lie detector didn't trigger, and because it'd been a pattern up to that point. That's how the game gets you, and it's brilliant in how it does it every time you play that section too. So yeah, not all twist villains are as bad as Hans from Frozen, or What's-His-Face from Big Hero 6. I can't even bother to look it up. The secret ingredient is logical and narrative consistency. As long as the audience can fit the pieces together themselves, it'll work out every time. You can't just pick a character at random and say, he's the villain, deal with it. You have to put in the legwork, otherwise you're gonna get Hans, and no villain wants to be Hans. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. This has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video and want to see more, check out my channel, and be sure to like and subscribe to help my channel grow. If you have other examples of twist villains, be they done correctly or done poorly, talk about them in the comments. And until next time, game on.